You know, our planet is hiding something absolutely massive from us. In this explainer, we're taking a journey straight downward to uncover the literally insane scale of the ocean. Just to give you an immediate sense of how vast this hidden world really is, think about Mount Everest for a second. If you plucked the tallest mountain on Earth and dropped it straight into the Mariana Trench, there would still be 2 whole kilometers of water sitting right above its peak. It's staggering. And if, for some impossible reason, the ocean had absolutely zero water in it and you jumped from the surface, it would take 3.5 minutes of total freefall just to hit the bottom. Earth is 71% water, yet the ocean floor remains this high-pressure, totally alien nightmare that we honestly barely understand. I mean, it is genuinely wild to think that we know more about the surface of Mars, a planet 400 million kilometers away, than we do about our own seabed. Humanity has only mapped about 27% of the ocean floor. The ocean is deeper than our tallest mountains. And today, we're going to measure exactly how deep it goes. Okay, let's dive into this. Starting at the very top, we have the epipelagic zone, which is basically the sunlight zone. This is the ocean you probably recognize, right? It's bright, it's full of life, it's where we swim, snorkel, and where sea turtles glide around. But get this, if you only ever experience the top couple of meters, you are less than 1/6,000th of the way to the bottom. And what completely blew my mind is that even understanding this very surface layer took some accidental science. Back in 1992, a shipping crate accidentally dumped 30,000 rubber ducks into the North Pacific. Those little guys washed up everywhere, from eastern Canada to Scotland, and tracking them completely rewrote our understanding of the ocean's surface currents. But we are not sticking around the surface. Say goodbye to the bob and yellow ducks because we're plunging down to our first real milestone, 30 meters, or about 100 feet. This is the stretch where most scuba diving enthusiasts spend their time. It's relatively shallow, sure, but it is an incredibly rich zone for exploration because this coastal area is where you find the vast majority of the world's estimated 3 million shipwrecks. A perfect example of what's hiding at this 30-meter depth is the iconic SS Thistlegorm, discovered by the legendary Jacques Cousteau. This British supply ship sank in the Red Sea during World War II, and it's just been sitting there as this fascinating time capsule for over 85 years. You're only about an 8-story office building down, or roughly the length of one blue whale. But the sights? They're incredible. The wreck is littered with vintage World War II jeeps, motorcycles, anti-aircraft guns, and, unbelievably, an entire train locomotive just resting on the ocean floor. Today, that old steamer is this vibrant home to coral and colorful schools of fish. Let's keep moving and see how this builds as we descend to 160 meters, or about 500 feet down. We've just bypassed the bottom of the Great Barrier Reef, which itself can drop to depths equal to about 10 school buses stacked end to end. Down here at 160 meters, we start finding truly ancient history. Off the coast of Italy, robotic submersibles, because it's getting too deep for human divers, have actually discovered first-century Roman cargo ships. These ancient vessels were ferrying hundreds of terracotta jars filled with olive oil and wine before they met their tragic end, right at a depth equal to a 50-story downtown office building. But let's do a quick reality check here. You aren't actually that deep yet. You're only about 1.5 football fields down, and the lights are already going dim. To put this into perspective, imagine my body as a depth chart of the ocean, with the very surface of the water resting right at the top of my hair. At this depth, we are barely at my slowly receding hairline. And yet the environment is rapidly changing around us. The twilight zone, or what scientists call the mesopelagic zone. Starting around 200 meters down, the sunlight basically vanishes. The temperature drops drastically from a comfortable 12 degrees Celsius down to a chilly 4 degrees. And this is where the truly bizarre life forms begin to emerge. Because light no longer comes from the sun above, it actually comes from the creatures themselves. Enter the anglerfish, a literal nightmarish evolutionary marvel that uses a bioluminescent lure dangling from its dorsal spine right in front of its mouth just to attract prey in the dark. But it turns out it is definitely not a ghost town in the twilight zone. In fact, about 90% of the world's fish live down here. This incredible density of life forms what is known as the deep scattering layer. In the 1940s, this layer of billions of fish, jellyfish, and squid was so overwhelmingly thick, it actually fooled sonar operators into thinking they had found a phantom bottom to the ocean. Every single morning, this massive collective migrates downward, a vertical distance equal to the height of the Burj Khalifa, just to hide from predators. Then, every night, they drift back up to feed on the plankton. It is literally the world's largest mass migration, and it's happening quietly every single day.
Slipping right past that massive migration, we hit the 500-meter mark. If you were standing next to the CN Tower in Toronto, you'd just be reaching its tip. This depth is the hunting ground of a creature that has terrified sailors for centuries and inspired countless myths. I'm talking about the Kraken, better known to science as the giant squid. This massive 10-legged hunter just thrives in this near-total darkness.
At one or just over 3,200 feet down, you cross a major threshold into the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. Using our human depth chart analogy, you're now descending just past my mouth. Turning on the headlights of a submersible down here, it feels like floating through outer space or driving through a really heavy snowstorm at night. That's because the water column is filled with marine snow. This is a continuous drift of organic matter falling from the higher, more populated zones. It's an absolutely essential food source for the squishy, slimy creatures down here. You'll also find deep-diving air breathers, like the monstrous sperm whale, venturing into these eerily quiet depths to hunt. But no mammal can naturally reach our next milestone. At 3,800 meters down, looming out of the gloom is the rusting exoskeleton of the RMS Titanic. Lost in the middle of the Atlantic in 1912, its final resting place wasn't even discovered until 1985. The sheer depth here kind of defies normal architectural comparisons. To really understand 3,800 meters, you have to imagine taking the entirety of Mount Fuji and dropping it into the ocean. That's how far down this legendary shipwreck lies, surprisingly well preserved in the freezing, dark water. We literally enter the abyss, the abyssopelagic zone. Back to our body depths chart, you've now passed my chest and are just shy of my waist. You are 36 football fields beneath the surface. You look out onto the abyssal plains, which is one of the largest and least populated habitats on Earth. The marine snow has mostly dried up by now, and the pressure is completely untenable for most surface organisms. Yet, alien-like life still survives. Down here, you find things that honestly sound like science fiction, like glass sponges, these incredibly fragile organisms with vase-like structures made of silica. They're effectively creatures made of glass and sand, and they can live for tens of thousands of years. Food in the abyss is incredibly scarce. So when a dead whale carcass, what they call a whale fall, touches down in this desert, it creates an absolute frenzy. First, mobile scavengers like sharks, hagfish, and snow crabs just swarm the massive body. Once they've had their fill, specialized worms and bacteria move in, slowly breaking down the remaining skeleton over a period of up to 50 years. It creates an entire self-sustaining, localized ecosystem. And that's not the only biological hotspot. Down here, hydrothermal vents, which are basically underwater volcanoes, spew sulfur compounds. Organisms use the sulfur to generate energy without a drop of sunlight, in a process scientists theorize could mirror exactly how life might evolve on Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons. Sinking even further, we hit 6,000 meters, roughly 4 miles deep. You are now as deep underwater as the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro is high in the sky. On my body scale, you're just going past my upper thigh. And we are about to cross the threshold into the single most extreme frontier on Earth. I've officially arrived in Hades. The hadopelagic zone only exists in the deep oceanic trenches of the world. We're talking about 6.7 Burj Khalifas deep. The isolation here is absolute. The darkness is complete. The temperatures are barely above freezing, and the pressure pushes biology to its absolute breaking point. Life is incredibly sparse. It's amazing, but scientists have actually found scattered oddities, like the snailfish, somehow surviving as deep as 8 kilometers down. But they theorize that the bone-crushing pressure beyond that point is simply too much for any creature with a skeleton to withstand. Now, what's really fascinating about crossing the 10,000-meter mark is how it just bends your perception of space. You are now deeper than the absolute furthest distance you can see when standing on land looking out at a perfectly flat horizon. The scale of this isolation is almost impossible for our human brains to fully process. There isn't much to see here but the steep, imposing walls of the trench itself, where entirely separate continental plates are being driven back down into the planet's mantle. And that brings us to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest place in the world. The pressure here, it's a terrifying 8 tons per square inch. If you've ever seen those viral videos of a hydraulic press crushing an iPhone, well, at this depth, you are the iPhone. The sheer physical weight of the world's oceans is literally pushing down on you. At this specific area, called Challenger Deep, you're as remote from humanity as it is physically possible to be on Earth. It's totally mind-blowing to think that more human beings have walked on the surface of the moon than have visited this exact spot.
The tiny visitor list includes a Swiss oceanographer and a U.S. Navy pilot who made the initial drop in 1960. And then, decades later, in 2012, Oscar-winning film director James Cameron, who somehow became the only person in history to make a solo trip down to this crushing depth.
So the crucial point here is grasping this final, ultimate depth, 11,034 meters. To picture that, you have to take Mount Everest and stack half a dozen Eiffel Towers on top of it just to reach the surface. If Usain Bolt, the fastest human alive, could somehow run straight down from the surface to the bottom at his maximum sprint speed, it would still take him 2.5 hours of nonstop sprinting to get there. You are as deep into the Earth as commercial passenger jets fly high above it. The sheer scale of the unknown beneath the waves is completely insane. It's a massive reminder of just how much of our own home we have yet to truly explore. But it leaves us with one lingering thought as we sit at the absolute bottom of our world. If drifting through the crushing, isolated dark of our own oceans is this mind-boggling and alien, what would it be like to drift through the truly endless, dark voids of outer space?